This is Sarah Jones on the Politicus Pod for Politicus USA's The Daily. Make sure you subscribe to our Substack so you don't miss any episodes. Today we're going to talk about the troubling theme coalescing on the right that points to the movement being anti-U.S. defense and anti-U.S. national security. So let's break that down. Treason. That's a pretty bold word, but at least according to some text messages from Fox News, they knew all about it. They know this is bad for the United States and that it looks like treason. In a Washington Post piece on the internal Fox correspondence being released in the recent Dominion Voting Systems defamation suit against the largest, most watched conservative media outlet, we found out that Fox called what Trump did treason. So I'm going to read you this. This is from that Washington Post piece. Josh Raphael, a former Trump White House aide, flagged to Shaw a tweet noting that Trump's daily schedule now carried with it the vague assurance that the president would make, quote, many calls and have many meetings and, quote, work from early in the morning until late in the evening, unquote. I don't know how many of you remember that, but I remember sharing that on Twitter when I got it from the White House, because it was astonishing. It was sort of what I would imagine a third grader would say to their teacher about, I did my homework. It was just another moment when it was very clear that not only there weren't adults in charge, but there wasn't anyone competent. The president was not competent. So here's what then we're getting into this internal correspondence going on. Quote, I think what they meant is the president will wake up early and commit many, many crimes, including but not limited to obstruction of justice, attempted fraud, and treason in an attempt to conduct a coup. Then he'll fly to a rally in furtherance of the same, Raphael wrote. It's really disheartening, Shaw responded. The only clear-cut evidence for voter fraud is the failed attempts from Trump. Can you believe? So that's from the Fox, the internal Fox communication. And I pulled out a few more pieces that I wanted to share with you. So, Sidney Powell is lying. Carlson wrote, might want to address this, but this stuff is so effing insane. Vote rigging to the tune of millions. Come on. And that, again, is the senior vice president of Fox Corporation. That's Shaw, who also served as a senior aide in Trump's White House. And what do these people really think about their viewers to whom they lie regularly? Well, I know they have contempt for them, but this is a new low. Cousin effing terrorist. You heard that right. Okay, Carlson's producer, Alex Pfeiffer, responded, it's so insane, but our viewers believe it, and so addressing again how her stupid Venezuela affidavit isn't proof might insult them. Like negotiating with terrorists, Pfeiffer added, but especially dumb ones, cousin effing types, not Saudi royalty. Well, I think we all know how the Republicans feel about Saudi royalty being the top of the pile. But who knew they thought their voters, I guess it is their voters, because really Fox News is the PR arm of the Republican Party, but their viewers are terrorists, dumb terrorists, cousin effing terrorists. So I'm going to get into the other ways that Republicans are posing a threat to security, and some of this some of this is violence, so just warning people ahead that there might be some triggers in here. So, Republican barely Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, has opened multiple doors to threaten our security, from Marjorie Taylor Greene to Tucker Carlson, to his refusal to comply with the bipartisan House January 6 Select Committee's subpoenas about his knowledge regarding the Republican president-led attempted coup attack on the United States Capitol. That was a mouthful. It's all true, though. Now Kevin McCarthy's in charge of a very small Republican majority in the House, and he's using that power to weaponize the government, to hold misleading hearings about imaginary conservative grievances that are sometimes a clear case of what is called DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. And he has given, the 1/6 security footage to a partisan liar to launder for Republicans. In one of those hearings, Marjorie Taylor Greene divulged classified information. McCarthy has ensured that Marjorie Taylor Greene is in the position to continue to endanger the United States. A problem like Marjorie. Representative Greene didn't realize that Ukraine was in Europe. That happened on Thursday. She was just so sure, you see. Quote, "I've never seen Putin actually show in any detail his plans to invade Europe. No one has shown me that. So I don't believe the lies that I'm being told about this." That's the end of her quote. What can we say? Putin didn't need to detail it, did he? Because he had already invaded. This fact is a lie, according to Greene, who clearly didn't know that Ukraine is the second largest European country. For a self-asserted expert on borders, she also seems clueless that Ukraine borders Russia. Perhaps a map would be helpful for the Homeland Security expert. Yes, that is correct. The Georgia Republican is on the Homeland Security Committee, specifically the Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability, and the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement. She's an expert on borders, except when it comes to Ukraine, apparently, and Europe, and Russia. But she knows everything. Okay. So, during a border hearing, after being told that the information she was divulging was given to the chief in a secure SCIF, that's the sensitive compartmented information facility, that's where they will go into that SCIF. You probably remember this from a lot of news footage. That's where classified information, deeply classified information, is shared. So he was saying it's not something he thought he should share. It was given to him in a secure SCIF. Greene dismissed him with, "I understand, Chief Ortiz, but I am not going to be confidential because I think people deserve to know." Now, you might wonder what has got her so upset that she's willing to endanger our national security. Well, she was upset about an explosive device that she thought existed. She thought this justified her sharing this classified information. But it turns out that this explosive device was actually dirt. Yes, that's right. Dirt. The chief shared during a January briefing, leadership was notified that agents found a duct tape ball filled with sand that wasn't deemed a threat to agents or the public. Sand, dirt. It's not an explosive device. So, sure, Chief Ortiz, but did you know who is a threat to agents and the public? That's right, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, I think, too, that a lot of Republicans play ignorant. They have fancy, Ivy law degrees. These are not stupid people. Ted Cruz comes to mind. They play stupid because they know that that works with their base, that their base doesn't like feeling insulted by knowledge. They've done that entire kind of pugilist, anti-intellectual appeal for. That's one of the really, Sarah Palin started that or restarted it here for Republicans as a good thing to be anti-knowledge, because it's very snotty to know things. So a lot of these Republicans are pretending to not know things, but Marjorie Taylor Greene actually seems to not know things, and it might be helpful for someone to get her a map so she could know what she was talking about on the Homeland Security Committee. Ah, boy. Laundering Russian PR. Before we get to this next part, it's important to put this lie in context. On Thursday, the Polish Interior Minister said that 9 people were arrested in Poland as a part of what it said was a Russian spy ring. They learned that this spy ring had received orders from Russia to carry out propaganda activities in order to destabilize Polish-Ukrainian relations, incite and arouse hostile sentiments toward NATO countries, and attack the Polish government's policy toward Ukraine. That sounds familiar, right? Yep, here we go to Fox News to get the latest Russian talking points from Tucker Carlson's show. Guest Douglas McGregor sold some hardcore Russian propaganda on Tucker Carlson's anti-U.S. TV program on Wednesday night, falsely claiming that, quote, this war was not started by Russia. He said, the truth is coming out that this war was not started by Russia, that Russia begged us not to try and drag Ukraine into NATO. We ignored Russia, and Russia made it very clear that they were going to defend their national interest. All they wanted was neutrality for Ukraine. And so that is why I read you what the Russian propaganda spy ring looked like in Poland, because it mirrors exactly what this guest said on Tucker Carlson's show. And I'm pretty sure that most of us recognize that propaganda now, but I've never seen it so clearly laid out and so concisely as this guest did. And when I heard that, and then today saw the news about the spy ring arrested in Poland, and that they were meant to inject this propaganda, this anti-NATO, anti-Ukraine propaganda that was also meant to divide their country, to undermine their pro-Ukraine policy. It was just very clear to me that this propaganda is being pushed all over the globe. And of course we know that. We know we're not the only country they're doing this in, but we are a country that has been very receptive to these lies. Mostly on the right, but there have been, and there still are, people on the far left who still believe these lies as well. So for all of those folks, and you out there who may speak to them, I wanted to get into, just to refresh why those things aren't true. So we know Russia invaded Ukraine illegally. Russia is committing war crimes. The UN investigators said on Thursday that war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. I put that press conference on our Substack if you would like to watch it. So in the war crimes isn't even new. A top United Nations human rights inquiry in 2022 found Russia to be committing war crimes. And the latest report goes so far as to recommend that Russia be investigated for crimes against humanity. let's pause here, because this is a really big deal. And while we can cherry pick things and pick out a straw man and say these people did X, and sure, the people in Ukraine aren't perfect and the people in the United States aren't perfect, and we've, sure, we invaded Iraq for all, there's a lot of fingers that we could be pointing, but crimes against humanity takes everything to a level I think everyone needs to appreciate the gravitas of. And if people respect human rights, if they respect life, and a lot of people that I see pushing these talking points like to weaponize the word peace, but what Russia's doing in Ukraine is the opposite of peace, and it's not going to be peaceful. They are engaging in torture, unlawfully transferring children and deporting them, separating them from their families, raping children as young as 4 years old, willful killings of civilians, rape and other sexual violence, and of course they invaded a sovereign nation. So to balance that out, in 2022, that UN Human Rights Inquiry found 2 instances of Ukrainian forces being responsible for human rights violations, but a significantly larger number of those instances that amounted to war crimes took place on the part of the Russian Federation. So you may hear, this did happen, the Ukrainians did that. Well, there were these 2 instances, and there were probably more than that they didn't investigate, or they found to not meet their criteria for whatever reason. Because we know, I used to anchor for the military. I've done some documentaries on military preparing for war. War is ugly and it's messy. And people don't always know even who is the enemy, but certainly our worst is brought out. Humanity's worst is on display during war. There's no question about that. And so, of course, I think anyone who's sane is against war as a concept. What this is not really war. It's war on the part of Russia, but on the part of Ukraine, this is defense to stop this relentless expansionism and aggression coming from Putin, which Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't believe exist. Now, this brings up something we talked about the other day, the isolationists. So we're hearing a lot about, Republican Party suddenly being led by isolationists because Ron DeSantis has expressed anti-Ukraine sentiment. He doesn't want to continue to give aid to Ukraine. We know Donald Trump shares the same. So those are the 2 leading presidential contenders for 2024 for the Republican Party at this moment. And they both are anti-Ukraine. So a lot of media is calling this isolationism, that this is a new isolationist tact. But I would like to point out that that's only when it comes to Ukraine. So that's a generous way of discussing an appeasement strategy, since it only applies to Russia. I think it would be misleading to leave it there, to say, they're isolationists. They certainly aren't isolationist. Not when it comes to other conflicts. This is not an isolationist party. The Republican Party is not an isolationist party, save for a few members of the libertarian wing. The Republican Party has always been the party of pro-Hawks, pro-defense, to the point of, George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq on a false premise, which I believe we are at the 20-year anniversary of. We discussed that Republican Russian backstory and Ron DeSantis joining the growing collection of weak Republican Putin slaves on Tuesday. That was a written piece that I did for our Substack. So And it's the good thing is, okay, a dozen or so Republican senators found the courage to speak out against DeSantis's Ukraine stance, which does show this growing division in the party from the Trump-Russia wing, which, those are the people leading the party. I mean, if they weren't leading the party, they're leading the House, they're the two leading presidential contenders. The Senate is saner for sure when it comes to Republicans, but there aren't enough Republicans who are in the sort of patriot wing of small d democracy. And that is a big concern because this isn't just some extremist. And I think a lot of times I see people comparing far left extremist elected officials. I mean, I really can't even, right now, I can't think of any. But that's how diluted that, voice has become as Democrats have had to become more and more moderate, in a sense, in order to have some strength to counter the anti-democracy movement on the right. So, I guess now I could think of a few people on the left with prominent voices who could be pinpointed and say, oh, this person has an extremist view on X. Yes, that's true. None of those people are leading the party. None of them are running for president. None of them are leading in the polls for president. So there just isn't this same, both sides-isms, just like Fox News was never the equivalent of MSNBC. Or rather, MSNBC was never the equivalent of Fox News. Fox News has long been the PR arm of the Republican Party. MSNBC is not. It has never operated that way. MSNBC used to, during the Obama era especially, if they weren't swimming in criticism of Obama, it wasn't, a news day. The left has always been that way, sort of picking apart their own, because one of the tenets, one of the principles is to not be a cult, to hold their own to account. And I think Republicans used to do this as well. It's just that they've stopped doing that. So it sort of highlights in more and more relief how and became a weakness for Democrats, frankly, and it shouldn't be. Holding yourself accountable, being criticized, and taking criticism should never be a weakness. But because of all of this cult propaganda going on the right, it's very difficult for a Democrat to, especially an anti-corporate Democrat, to run for office and win against all of those forces. So now we get to pushing January 6th lies. Kevin McCarthy has still not released the footage for the public to see in an unedited format. He gave this footage to Tucker Carlson. Why won't he release it for the public? Instead, McCarthy chose to even further elevate Tucker Carlson, the aforementioned Russian propagandist, by giving Carlson exclusive access to 41,000 hours of January 6 security footage with which to amplify January 6 lies. Some members of Congress have condemned McCarthy's actions, but words don't matter to politicians who cater to a no-shame constituency. Tucker has willfully and deceptively edited this footage in an attempt to create the false impression that the Trump terrorists were just sightseers. These sightseers, quote-unquote, were part of an attack on the U.S. Capitol, working to stop the certification of the 2020 election. That is not what a sightseer does. January 6th. So, as I did with the whole Ukraine, when we're hearing all this propaganda, it's important, and I know you guys know what happened on January 6th, it's still important to go back and pick out a few pieces to refresh and strengthen the memories as they are being assaulted by this really intense propaganda effort to whitewash what happened. So I want to remind everyone that the FBI Director Christopher Wray labeled the January 6th attack a domestic terrorist attack. In March of 2021, Wray bluntly labeled the January riot at the U.S. Capitol as domestic terrorism and warned of a rapidly growing threat of homegrown violent extremism that law enforcement is scrambling to confront through thousands of investigations. Tucker Carlson, Speaker McCarthy, and all of the Republicans on the Homeland Security Committee all know this. They all know all of those facts that I just listed. They know this is a domestic terrorist movement. They know that law enforcement is struggling to keep up, that these extremist threats are increasing and pose a threat to our safety. Why are they pushing lies that not only whitewash the attack, but make the next one more likely? Why? Why are they pushing these lies that whitewash domestic terrorism against the United States of America? Speaker McCarthy is the Speaker of the U.S. House. I mean, this is... It should be unfathomable. It is really difficult to grasp how horrific this really is and what a threat it poses to our democracy. I've put on the Substack a video about what happened, what really happened on January 6th. For anyone who feels they need to see it or they need to share it with someone who is denying this event, that is posted on the Substack. But let's just look at some of the truth from the people who were there instead of someone who, some vaccinated Fox News host sitting in his studio getting his makeup done so he can lie more to his viewers. Also lying about the vaccine. How many ways can he endanger his own viewers? I don't know. I think it's endless at this point. Here are some quotes from law enforcement who were there. Unlike Tucker Carlson was nowhere near it. He doesn't know what happened, and he knows he's watched that security footage, so he knows he's lying to people. But he was never in danger. These people were in danger. Their lives were at risk in this attack. It was like something from a medieval battle. Army veteran Gonal said he was a Capitol Police sergeant, "We fought hand to hand, inch to inch, to prevent an invasion of the Capitol by a violent mob intent on subverting our democratic process." He has since retired, citing trauma from this 1/6 attack, and he said it was worse than what he faced during his deployment to the Iraq War. Nothing in my experience in the Army or as a law enforcement officer prepared me for what we confronted on January 6th, he said in his testimony. I did not recognize my fellow citizens. One of them shouted that I, an Army veteran and a police officer, should be executed. These are the people, by the way, some of the members of the Republican House caucus, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, are organizing these prison visits to January 6th defendants. They've got some song they've made for them. They're elevating these people to be heroes and martyrs. And this is what they've really done. This is who they're celebrating. This officer and his colleagues were sprayed with chemicals. They were punched and kicked. He said, I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I am going to die. D.C. Metro officer Michael Fanone nearly died on January 6th after Trump terrorists beat him until he was unconscious and he suffered a heart attack. As they were beating him, Fanone says he heard a Trump attacker shout, "Get his gun, kill him with his own weapon." I was electrocuted again and again and again with the taser. I'm sure I was screaming, but I don't think I could even hear my own voice. He says he pleaded with them not to kill him, saying, I have kids. If this is not heartbreaking, if this is not a moment for this country to come together, then I don't know. I don't know what could be. This isn't a moment when Fox News is going to have a come to Jesus moment and put patriotism before their ratings. And they're not doing it. They've chosen their ratings. They've made that very clear. But I want to be clear that they are rejecting patriotism and humanity because of their ratings. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn recounted being called the N-word after he tried to bring the attackers back to reality by pointing out the election wasn't stolen and that his own vote wasn't imaginary. And one woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This N-word voted for Joe Biden." How did the conservative base react to their own attacking law enforcement and Army veterans? Well, Tucker Carlson demeaned Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, calling him an angry activist. All of these pieces that I have just woven together here, because to me they tell the story on every level. There is not only disregard for our national security and our safety, but I would say intentional endangerment. I can't see any way around that. I wish it weren't true, but I can't see any way that this isn't intentional by, sure, not every Republican, only, the MAGA Republicans and DeSantis types, but that is unfortunately the ruling class of this modern day Republican Party. So we have to see what is and not what we wish we could see. I don't want to see this. I don't want this to be true for our country. I can't imagine ever I can't imagine justifying what Republicans and Fox News are justifying, not only with the stolen election, but then, their fake stolen election claims, but then which have those lies in part fueled this attack, this domestic terrorism attack, which they are now whitewashing. So on every level, along with the Russian propaganda, this is intentional. They're trying to confuse you. They're trying to plant these seeds of doubt, of lies, of undermining support for Ukraine, which is to say undermining support for Western democracy, which is a huge threat to the United States. Domestic terrorists who attacked our country, they're now being feted by House Republicans. The Speaker gave Fox News Russian propagandists access to January 6th security footage so it could be whitewashed. That same media company, Fox News, is pushing blatant Russian propaganda designed to divide global democracy and undermine support for Ukraine. That same media company also knows Trump lied about the 2020 election, and they know the coup they are denying happened was actually part of treason. That's what they called it. It's not even my word. That's what they saw. I wonder how many of you saw that. It sure looked that way. The Homeland Security Committee is poisoned by someone who doesn't even know that Ukraine is in Europe, and for some reason is convinced that her take on Putin's expansionist ambitions is better than those who actually know where Ukraine is on a map. Taken together, these very troubling events and narratives and actions tell the story of a party and movement that is a threat to our security, both national security and our domestic security. This is Sarah Jones on the Politicus Pod. For Politicus USA's The Daily, if you are tired of billionaires controlling the news you see and you want to support independent news like this that puts the people first, please do subscribe to our Substack. Thank you.